What up, fam? Welcome back to another lesson with Mr. Bias, and in today's lesson we're talking about equations and solving them when we have variables on both sides. If you guys went ahead and missed out on our last two episodes, we talked about one-step equations, we talked about two-step equations. There's a little eye up here that's going to connect you to one of those old videos. If it's not working up there, there's also links and descriptions down below. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into our lesson. Because we've worked on solving equations before with our one-step and two-step equations, these are going to be pretty simple and straightforward. So we're just going to review over the steps to help us solve these kind of equations. There's only going to be 3 different steps, so let's go ahead and write those down before we start working on our own equations. So our first step to go ahead and solve these equations is to collect the variables on one side of the equation. So when we're doing this, we will keep the variables with the greatest value and cancel out the variables with less value. So all those smaller x values, they're going to go away and we're going to keep the bigger ones. So step number 2 is collect the constants to the other sides. All the things that we're adding, subtracting, we're going to move on to the other side. And finally, our third step is we're going to solve the equation for our variable. We want to figure out what is that x value, what is that missing number that we don't know yet. Alright, so let's go ahead and look at all 3 steps again, one after the other. First step is collect the variables to one side of the equation. Our second step is collect all the constants on the other side of the equation. And our last step is then we're going to go ahead and solve the equation for all our variables. So let's go ahead and use all these 3 steps to help us solve our equations when we have variables on both sides. So here we have our equation 4x plus 5 equals 20 plus 7x. We have 4x on the left side of the equation, we have 7x on the other side. So our first step is we want to collect all the variables onto one side, and we want to keep our larger values. So in this case, 7x's are more than 4x's, it has more value. So we're going to keep this one and we're going to go ahead and cancel out this 4x. So my first step is moving our x's to one side. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this 4x. And remember, whatever I do to one side, I'm going to have to do to the other. So on the other side of my equal sign, I'm going to subtract 4x's. So 4x minus 4x is going to go away to 0, and all I'm going to be left with is a 5 on this side. The 5 is equal to, I'm still going to have that 20, so that's going to come down, plus 7x's minus 4 of those x's leaves me with 3x's. So now I have 5 equals 20 plus 3x. Our second step now is to collect all our constants on the other side. So now we only have 1x on the right. I want to get rid of this 20 and I'm going to move it to the other side. But to get rid of this 20, to cancel it out, since this is a positive 20, the opposite of a positive would be a negative. So I'm going to subtract 20. 20 minus 20, well, that goes away to 0, and all I'm going to be left with on this side is 3x. Whatever I do to one side, I got to do to the other. So 5 minus 20, I'm going to subtract that 20. So that's going to leave me with a negative 15 because I'm taking away more than I have. So now my last step, step number 3, is I'm going to go ahead and solve for my variable. I want to figure out what is that x value. So to get rid of that coefficient of 3 in front of our x, we're going to go ahead and divide. I want to get rid of this 3 so I get x all by itself. The opposite of multiplying by 3 is going to be dividing by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is going to leave me with 1, so I'm going to have 1x all by itself. But whatever I do to one side, I got to do to the other. We have 15 and we're dividing it by 3. That leaves me with 5. And since we had a negative divided by a positive, that means this answer is going to be a negative 5. So our solution to this equation is negative 5 equals x. Let's go ahead and look at one more example before we finish our lesson. Alright, so here we have our next equation. We have 5x plus 28 equals negative 2x minus 7. We're going to go ahead and do our 3 steps to solve this equation so we can know what that variable x is. Step number 1. We're going to collect our variables on one side. keeping the variable with the greatest value and canceling out the smallest variable. We have 5x and we have negative x. Our value that we're going to keep is the one that has the greatest value. So in this case, 5x has a greater value than negative 2. Because if I have $5 and I owe somebody $2, I have a greater value if I have $5 than owing somebody money. We're going to keep our 5x and we're going to get rid of this negative 2x. Okay, since this is an equation, we want both sides to be equal. So to get rid of this negative 2x, the opposite would be a plus 2x. So this number goes away, and all I'm going to be left with at the end of that is going to be just a negative 7. But whatever I do to one side, I got to do the other. So I'm going to add 2x's to this side. So this becomes 7x plus 28. And I'm just bringing down this 28 down there. Now our second step is to go ahead and collect all the constants on the other side. So let's go ahead and get that done. I have 7x and I'm adding a positive 28. So I want to get rid of this constant right here because I want to move it over here with the negative 7. So I'm going to subtract 28 because the opposite of a positive 28 is a negative 28. So that goes away to 0. I'm going to bring down my 7x is equal to, well, whatever I did to this side, the negative 28, I got to do to this side. So I'm going to also subtract 28. These are two negatives, so I have a negative 7 and I'm subtracting 28. So this answer is going to get even more negative if I'm subtracting. So 7 and then 28 more makes that 35. And it's going to be a negative 35. Step number 3. So to solve this problem, we're going to get rid of this 7 right in front of our x. And this is 7 times x, so the opposite of multiplying is going to be dividing. So when we have 7 and we divide it by 7, those 7's go away and leaves me with just 1x all by itself is equal to whatever I do to one side, I gotta do to the other. So since we divided by 7 over here, I'm also going to divide by 7. 35 divided by 7 is just 5. And whenever I have a negative divided by a positive, my answer is going to be a negative. So in this equation, x is equal to negative 5. So let's go ahead and review the steps that we took. In our first step, we collected the variables to one side. In our second step, we collect the constants to the other side. And then in our third step, we solve the equation for the variable. Alright guys, so if you found this video helpful, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. And until next time, bye!